get started.
Great. Thank you. So we'll start by going around the commissioners table here in the room, and then as usual, I will read the names of all the commissioners I see online. This is Chris Owen, Air Director of Administration, providing staff association. So why don't we start down at the end of the table with Jared?
Oh, yeah, thanks. I'm Darren Lova, Chief of Environment and Sustainable Transportation with NDOT, and I'm here on behalf of Secretary.
I'm Hans Schmitz, Assistant Secretary for Resource Conservation, Maryland Department of Agriculture, Sydney, Secretary Adams. Brian Gallup, Director of Energy Policy.
Who has it from the comptroller's office? Jennifer Mizrahi. Who I am.
Josh Kurtz, do you know?
Michael Powell,
David Smitic, one of two Geo representatives.
David Stein, delegate. We have as unseated here for President Fernando Villalobos.
Alexa Foxworth here on behalf of PSC Chair Frederick Cooper.
Eric Fisher with Critical Area Commission.
Great. Then, Jason DeBauer here on behalf of the Secretary Forrest. I see Mike Hinson. And I'm getting notes that the audio is tough, so I'm gonna yell while we troubleshoot. I see Dr. Dickerson.
Yep. Hello. This is, can you hear me? Russ Dickerson from the University of Maryland, science liaison, and currently at the Max Planck Institute in Germany.
Oh, thanks for joining.
It's dinner time here.
Okay. That doesn't mean you're eating on the screen. Okay. Russ. Others, audio okay?
Real quick.
Okay.
Thank you, Jake. There you go. Thank you. It was running off your laptop. Yeah, exactly. You said it was last time. How about now?
Any improvement? Yes, I'm seeing some nodding. This may be as good as it gets for now, and we'll continue on. Did I miss any commissioners when I went through understanding of questions? Maybe you couldn't hear us very well.
Sorry, hi, this is Brooke Lehrman. I don't know if you saw me or not. Hi.
Welcome. Okay, yeah, we got you, Dr. Gilden. Okay, well, we have a good turnout. We definitely have quorum. See many commissioners online. I advise we proceed at this time. And maybe I'll just note for members of the public, we will have public comment later on in the agenda. If you're online and you'd like to be added to the list for public comment, please put your name in the chat and we'll add you. And if you're in the room, we'll come around when the time comes in the room as well. I'll bring the agenda up on the screen. And with that, Chair, we have quorum and we can get started.
All right, I'll start again and say good afternoon to everyone. It's so good to see all of you. I do want to start by just really thanking everybody for your time and your energy and all of the leadership that you continue to bring to this commission. We would not be the commission that we are without all of you. So wanted to take a moment just to say thank you. We know that this is our third meeting of the year. And our last discussion, it's going to be our last discussion before we turn to the recommendation season, we call it, in September, which I can't believe this is the last meeting, but before recommendations, time goes so fast. And that's one of the reasons why I think that today it's really important that we just take a moment to reflect and align. We have been going at it. There's a lot that's been going on around us. I think this is our time to just really think about what we're doing, where we headed. A lot of things have happened from the federal perspective anyway, even just as of last week. And I think we just need to get clear together on how best should Maryland move forward in all the areas and all of the sectors and all of the things we talk about this mission. So on the agenda today, we have a quick report out on this year's climate teaching. Did I miss something? Oh, you,
We'll be flipping the agenda around a bit.
yeah, I was gonna
But
get to
yes,
that. I was gonna get to that.
we're good.
Okay, so on the agenda, we have a quick report out for this, regarding this year's climate teach-in. I can't wait to hear about that. We also have a very important briefing from the comptroller. Thank you for being here. I know you're going to be speaking on the cost of inaction, your report, and that is so important for us to hear. So I'm really happy that you're going to be giving us that report out. And finally, we're going to have a forward-looking conversation, really, again, about Maryland's climate path forward. And again, it's really in light of everything that's going on, the challenges that we have, the opportunities. So before we get started, I do want to inform you all that I have to leave at somewhere around 2 something, maybe 2:15. I have a congressional meeting that starts at 3:35 on Capitol Hill. So we're going to change the order a little bit. So we're going to, I think we should just start with the path forward. Let's talk about that discussion first. So we're going to switch this agenda around just a little bit. And Kim, we have my wonderful folks here. Take over when I do leave. That was the, oh yeah. So I appreciate that. Let's see. I wanted to also quickly acknowledge something that's a milestone for us that we've done, and that is the 4 new working groups that were created under Climate Solutions Now Act. They have completed all of their studies. Thank you very much. That was a lot. A lot was done in a short period of time, and so I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of you. It was a big lift, and I think now that we have those reports, it's time for us to put those groups really, I guess you'll be in more of a pause kind of standpoint until we need more work done and we need more analysis coming out of your group. But you fulfilled what you were supposed to, the studies, and we thank you. So basically that's where we are with that. We're just gonna put those work groups on pause just for a little bit until we may do it. Any questions on that? Okay, and I know we have members from the public in this meeting. Thank you for joining. We do have some time set aside at the end so we can hear from you and get your input as well. I think the first thing we need to do now is approve the minutes. So why don't we jump right into that?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Included in the materials for today are minutes from the April 15th meeting that we had. I brought them up on the screen here as well. Are there any comments or changes anyone would like to suggest to the minutes? Or we entertain? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion to approve the minutes for the April 15th meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from April 15th, please raise your hand. Online as well. Okay, are there any no's for approving the minutes? Are there any abstentions? Okay, the April minutes are approved. Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to go right into the path forward for Maryland. I've said this often, but I have to say, we cannot lose sight of why we're doing the work that we do. It is just so important. And in moments like this, when the landscapes shift and we have uncertainty, it really becomes a time for us to be clarity, and really take a step back and assess and really look at what's going on around us. And so I've asked my team to put together a presentation that really brings to life things that we may not see. Like, really, where are we? What's going on? What is the real impact of what's going on around us? And I hope you find this presentation enlightening. And afterwards, I would love for us to have a conversation about it and really just have a deep dive conversation on what we're about to go through. So with that, why don't I turn it over to you? You have a question, Paul?
No, no.
Okay. All right, Chris, why don't you walk us through this presentation?
Thank you. So we'll have a brief presentation to set some of the context for the discussion. So for the first part, as a reminder, we have our greenhouse gas reduction goals for 2031, which is a 60% reduction below 2006 baseline, and for 2045, which is net zero economy wide. This graphic is from the climate plan that we issued in late 2023 about how to get there, showing total statewide emissions from 2006 out through 2050. Colorful areas represent greenhouse gas emissions from various sectors of the economy. So this is the emissions trajectory we would have for the plan to achieve the goals. We've added to here that recent status pointer there is pointing to where our 2023 emissions are ending up. We have a preliminary greenhouse gas inventory for 2023, one of our triennial inventories. It'll be in final form later this year, but its preliminary form is that in 2023, we were at about a 29% reduction below 2006. That is roughly flat emissions from our 2020 inventory, where between 2020 and 2023, we saw transportation patterns recover from their 2020 levels when there was disruptions due to COVID. And so that was an increase from 2020 to 2023, and that was offset by continued emissions reductions in other sectors. Where we are right now on this pathway here is that we're a little bit off the pathway. Note that 2023 was the year before the plan was issued. So by definition, you're sort of not on track for the plan in the year in which you're writing the plan. However, it is 2023 not going to be on track for the trajectory in the plan that was issued at the end of that year. So we have a lot of reductions ahead of us to meet the targets in the plan that we issued before. So we'll talk about some changes at the federal level that have occurred, and also status of state actions within the plan to frame the discussion ahead. But noting first that quite a bit of the plan is in fact on track. Many of the measures that the state identified in the climate pollution reduction plan are moving ahead. Lots of really great work that is occurring. So I'll highlight a little bit of that here. The materials here are just a list of action items that were in the plan that are moving largely as envisioned in the plan. And it's a long list. There were lots and lots of things that the state identified actions to take. Some of these are really, really significant. Including, the reforms to the Empower Maryland program, where Empower this year is offering incentives for electrification in homes, which was a recommendation that the commission made. This commission made years ago and echoed for several years. And here we are today in this latest round of Empower incentives is delivering upon that. And so that's really great news. And there's a long list of things that are moving ahead. Lots of progress we can continue to build upon. We also, through the governor's executive order that he issued last year that stood up a climate sub-cabinet and individual agency climate plans. There's a lot of really good work going on to highlight across the agencies. Just a couple of highlights from some of the agencies around the table here. MDE, DNR, and MDE and MDA Ag. We are working together on the Atlantic Coastal Coalition with significant funding secured from the feds to do lots of great work that will sequester carbon. DES is working on power agreements and decarbonizing state facilities, really big things. MDOT is continuing to implement NEVI, and Darren can explain how there was successful court action to continue to be able to implement NEVI, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, with significant federally funded charge infrastructure going in. And MEA continues to deploy new and expanded investment programs in communities and in clean energy. So there is a lot of really great work occurring, consistent with the plan that was issued, and in some cases building upon it and going farther. So we have lots of progress to build upon. So where do we go now? We're looking at a lot of uncertainty. There are several key federal and state policies that are facing implementation uncertainty, and which are presenting new challenges to our goals. First, federal policy rollbacks. The Commission discussed this at our meeting back in April. University of Maryland's Center for Global Sustainability came and presented, you'll all recall, about some analysis that they have performed about the impacts of rollbacks in federal decarbonization policies. This is a slide from that April presentation summarizing their national level analysis, where given the federal rollbacks, the national trend for greenhouse gas reduction will be a lot slower than it was going to be, represented by the orange area on this graph, showing national net greenhouse gas emissions projected out over the next 10 years or so. But that continued non-federal leadership could make up the ground and could keep the nation on a better path. So those were sort of their two takeaways, that the federal rollbacks are really going to have a strong impact in slowing our trajectory of reducing greenhouse gases, but there are opportunities for non-federal actors to step in and keep progress going. Note this was analysis they did in the spring, and they presented to us 3 months ago. It holds up pretty well. The legislation that passed, that the president signed on July 4th, matched pretty closely the assumptions that UMD had put in this analysis. So I know that they're continuing to work to refine their estimates, but they had a pretty good guess. So these are still very useful trajectories to look at for the current state of play of the federal government. There's one action that was not in their analysis that's significant that we should highlight, which was the feds revoking waivers issued by EPA that allowed states, including Maryland, to implement the advanced clean cars to advanced clean trucks. That was not in their analysis. But otherwise, they guessed at the outcome of federal policy pretty well, and they'll continue to refine it. So at a national level, the federal rollbacks will have a really significant impact on the nationwide trajectory, but it is possible to bend that curve back downward. We don't have estimates like that for Maryland yet, for the exact impacts of the federal rollbacks in Maryland. But we did bring together some analysis that we've been performing with the mitigation working group for the Commission, with some illustrative estimates for what this means for Maryland. So with the MWG, we identified 6 general categories for major state actions in the climate pollution reduction plan that are facing implementation uncertainty. And we've provided some rough numbers to get a sense of scale for what those programs mean for our trajectory. So the first was cap and invest or a similar policy. This was something that factored in the plan to sort of close the gap between individual measures and the goal, and mobilize investment across the economy. The Commission made a recommendation in this regard last year, and that has not been implemented. The plan also include a clean energy standard. That has not yet been implemented. This standard or similar program to achieve 100% clean electricity by 2035. That is still a work in progress. The plan included the building energy performance standards, Maryland's MDE's regulations decarbonizing large buildings. Those are continuing. They are facing some implementation uncertainties as the program is changing in the General Assembly as it comes together. But it is uncertain exactly how that program will work. and what those changes will mean over the coming years. And then Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Trucks, as I mentioned, our programs requiring increasing shares of new vehicles sold into the state to be electric. Both of those have been affected by federal action that is being litigated, but that would remove our authority to enforce those programs. And those were responsible in the plan for quite a bit of EV deployment and reduction of transportation-related emissions. And then the Maryland Transportation Plan, MDOT's goal to reduce vehicle miles traveled by 20%. That is still, of course, a guiding goal. MDOT's working toward it, but there are new federal obstacles and challenges being put in place. So we have some estimates here of just to put these measures in perspective in terms of their size. So we're showing for those 6 measures identified as 5 lines here because clean cars and clean trucks are merged. The number of tons of reductions that we are expecting from those policies in 2031 and 2045. And then in those 2 columns, and then down at the bottom, a sum of imagining those programs went away entirely. Sort of a worst case, so they simply don't exist. Where would we be in 2031 versus 2045 just from those programs not happening? And so in 2031, instead of being at a 60% reduction, which is the goal, we would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 52 to 55% statewide in the absence, the complete absence of those programs. And then in 2045, instead of being at net 0 tons of greenhouse gases economy-wide, we would still have between 23 and 27 million tons in the economy in 2045. So that is a worst case estimate in the sense that it's assuming those programs go away entirely when they're not going away entirely, many of them. But it's also not a worst case estimate in that we have not yet incorporated explicitly what the federal rollbacks would mean for Maryland. So we would be farther from the goals if we were accounting for all of the federal actions that we have not yet accounted for specifically for Maryland impacts yet.
Do we have numbers for that?
Not yet. Not yet.
I just want to point out on this slide is the really important one. As you, again, we have a goal of 60%. There's a lot of things that are changing. You see number 2, ACC2, that one, as you know, has been rescinded. You can see what we were expecting in terms of reductions in that area. But again, these are just ideas and just to really show you that maybe this is where we need to focus our attention as a commission on those areas where we can get the best bang really for our buck, and which is why I wanted to be able to show you what all of this means when it comes to greenhouse gas reductions.
Chris, if I could.
Question. Did you say that these are incremental, like annual emissions figures, or they're cumulative by those years?
These are annual in those years. Yeah, they're not cumulative.
Brian, actually related to Brian, when you're modeling something like cap and invest, are you assuming that it's enacted now? You're not assuming that it just gets enacted in 2031 and you get a 4 million reduction in the year of enactment?
Correct. The way the analysis worked is that it sort of started in the present day, largely 2025, and then policies be sort of phased in policy by policy. So by 2031, that was the impact of that policy. In 2031, understanding that it wasn't a 2030 new policy.
And we do have the cap and invest, you all know, we have RGGI, the region of greenhouse gas.
Yes. And that's one of the policies in the plan that is being implemented.
And there isn't anything in the federal rollback that jeopardizes RGGI.
No, RGGI is entirely state authority. RGGI is very old. The RGGI regulation has been in place for 16 years in Maryland, and it's not going to change with federal action.
We hope.
David Smetic.
Congrats on the RGGI program review.
Thank you.
Oh,
Great job. And then my question, sorry for the sidebar. Looking at these, so the chart up here is suggesting that these 5 policies in 2031, if they were to completely go away, which again, still working on them, we'd hit 52 to 55%. So below the 60% goal, but that this also then would assume that, say, the list earlier that you had about state actions that are facing uncertainty, there were, within our bigger list, I'm thinking of things like, does this assume that the clean heat standards, the zero emission heating equipment standards, the other new programs would be in place as well?
Correct. Yeah, those
Okay.
are ones that we identify on the list that we are continuing as planned.
Great. Thank you.
So this does not include the impact of losing those.
Great. Thanks.
And we're doing more modeling, right? We have the University of Maryland modeling a lot of the changes for us even further than this, correct? 'Cause I know I'd
Yes.
asked for that.
Yeah,
You
and
want
we're
to talk about that a little bit?
sure, we're hoping in the fall to have more precise numbers that do account for the impacts of federal rollbacks, similar to the national estimates that I presented from the University of Maryland. We're hoping to have Maryland-specific versions of those later in the fall. We don't have a specific date when that'll be available yet. But we are working.
When you recalculate, are you going to adjust the BEPS number, for example, for new hospitals, the 14% reduction there? And for ACC2, are you going to make assumptions that we're not going to have enforcement the first 2 years, but are you going to assume what happens in the third and fourth year?
So for ACC2, there was, just for everyone, there was enforcement discretion that the state exercised for the first 2 years of the program. And then subsequently, Congress passed a resolution to sort of eliminate the program entirely. And the president signed that resolution, and that's under litigation right now. So I guess we have a choice for that one, what we want to put in the model, whether we're only looking at a 2-year delay or entire being rescinded entirely. I don't think we have a decision on that modeling assumption yet, but I guess we're open to input since we haven't done the modeling yet.
I mean, from my perspective, I think you sort of need to know, but I mean, if the whole thing goes away, if you lose the litigation, so you got to assume you win the litigation. But I don't assume that if you've had no enforcement for the first 2 years, that in the third year, we will reach the percentages called by ACC2. That to me is just an unrealistic assumption. What's it in the third year? What's the percentage? Is it 42%, something like that?
Model year 2029. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a little higher than that.
Yeah, and if with no enforcement the first 2 years, I think the chances of 42% of the new sales being electric cars in 2029, I think we've got to be realistic on the assumptions if we're going to make planning, and that to me just doesn't pass the test. That's really why I asked about the cap and invest. I think it's not realistic to assume that in 2025, an election year, that will be fully adopted. Maybe there'll be a study, but I don't think it'll be fully adopted. So I think to the extent that I would encourage that to the extent the plan can talk about those as contingencies or assumptions, it might be useful for us to know exactly what we're faced.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the input. And again, as a reminder, on the screen here is assuming those programs are simply gone entirely, none of the nuance that Mike was talking about. Yeah. So I hand up this end of the tape. The Director Pitts.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's commenting on this slide or the general discussion, but I wanted to follow up Mike's comments. We don't know the impact on a number of these. Each day I go from here being pessimistic to being optimistic. And I would just want to give you an example. We met with utility scale solar people last week. And my belief was after the 30% goes away, there would be a cliff. I think, I was thinking in my head that much of solar would, because people couldn't pencil it without the 30 or 40 or 50%. But I was surprised that they thought, while they want to make the 30% and do the safe harbor and get as many projects alive, they were not as concerned about when the 30% goes away. They think that they may import panels from China, which are much cheaper than US panels. And even with a tariff, it's not going to be so bad and throw their numbers off. So they were not as pessimistic as I was going into the meeting. And the same may be true on some of the other categories. We don't know. I think we're putting out programs. We don't know what the response will be of whether they can make their mark on the financing without the 30%. Are there other creative things they can do, saving money, cheaper panels, whatever? If the cost goes down, utility rates go up, there might be savings. So yeah, there's part of me that wants to be very pessimistic and think we're in for bad times. Now, EV sales, you know, the chart has sales continue to increase, but at a slower rate. With the $7,500 going away, you know, my first instinct is to say sales will go down. But our price could come down and we might have more other brands of cars that are cheaper. Obviously, the Chinese are making a cheaper car. And ironically, the president want to get rid of, he doesn't like EVs, but the result is going to increase sales in China. You know, the so-called beast, economic beast that he wants to contain. So my point is, it's hard, Mike, to make some assumptions on these things until it washes out a little bit. Again, 52% down, and that's not including the Reconciliation Act. So that number would be dropped significantly, I think, at least for us. So, you know, I'm pessimistic, but I don't want to lock in that pessimism because things have not washed out yet. So that's just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, what I would envision, maybe you're on the same page, right, is a sort of range. I'm optimistic, pessimistic, and know what the range is. But you know, if we assume, if we did numbers that said cap and invest passes next year, or we assume that there's no drop in EVs, it seems to me that would be pessimistic. I mean, that gives us unlikely numbers. But I agree with you that you don't know. Instantly, as a side issue, all my solar clients, I've noticed it depends on who I talk to. If I talk to the people whose jobs are dependent on the projects, they're all optimistic. If I talk to the people who are company-wide, they're pessimistic. I don't know which one's right, but I have noticed, I just was talking to somebody about that yesterday. So who knows?
And let me just make one other comment. A number of these policies didn't just not happen, they were rejected. And I would love to see cap and trade pass next year, but I wouldn't bet the house. So I think I want us to be pretty transparent and honest and put the conditions on the table. That's all.
I think some of the things didn't pass because I think we all agreed as a commission to consider the landscape of what was going on around us. Like we were all trying to figure out what was happening on the federal level. There were so many changes coming our way. We're trying to be aggressive as a state so that we can meet not 52%, but 60%. And so we were pushing a lot of things out. And I think it kind of forced the state really to just slow down a little bit, understand what's happening around us. It was happening so fast. But it is something that we need to think about and consider. I think what's important about this slide as well is back to the things that we're talking about as a commission. Where do we get the best bang for our buck? Like, for example, ACC2 and ACT. Those are going away, at least for right now. We can't enforce, we can't implement, but that's where education comes in, right? Maybe we need to focus more on educating the consumer so that instead of those sales dropping, which is happening now, we need to figure out, what do we do? How do we be positive, think ahead, and try and get those numbers up or continue to go? So again, we just have so much to think about. How do we continue to make progress with all that's going on around us?
Follow up, Madam Secretary, I know that you're chair of the work group for the ACC2 and the ACT.
Yes.
Is that still proceeding? Is that work group still working?
It is. We met for the first time. Was it last week? last week. It was a great conversation. We had industry there, and of course, state representation. It was really great. And it basically, we kind of did the same thing, which was, where are we today? What does all of this mean? How do we actually move forward as a state when it comes to ensuring that we're meeting the goals that we have to meet? More importantly, the air pollution goals we have. Because ACC2 and ACT, people look at it as if it's just an EV regulation, but we have to stay in air attainment. So it's, what do we do? How do we move forward with all this that's going on? So yes, the work group just met. I think we have another meeting coming up next month. So we'll continue to move down that road.
Okay,
Any other
well, with that, we were going to transition to discussion, and just as a visual aid for discussion, this pie chart shows the preliminary 2023 inventory showing the breakdown of Maryland's greenhouse gases by economic sector, with some thought prompter questions for discussion.
Yeah, so I'd like to open it up, look at those pies, the pie slices, and maybe if we can just think for a couple of seconds on, with what we have in front of us, where should we actually focus our attention? And you see the industries here, and what are some of the alternative opportunities that we have to continue the progress that we're making? And you can read the rest of the slide, but I think this will be a rich conversation if we can all just be a part of it.
My concern is that much of what we need to do is public-private partnership and to do the education to get companies, nonprofits, and private individuals to make their own decisions with their own dollars that they want to do smart climate policies, which will largely be based on what is the most cost-effective thing for their family. I'm very concerned that to get the public to participate, we need to have a larger faith in government, which we unfortunately nationally don't have. But even in our state, my sense is that we don't have a strong partnership with the public and the partnerships. I think many of us have read the book Abundance, and if you haven't read it, I encourage everyone to read it. And I really encourage everyone to take a look back at the Reinventing Government initiative that Al Gore did that enabled our country to make government work better and cost less, and to also think about the opportunities for town hall meetings and for public engagement to really build partnership so that the public will really dig in with their own time and treasure to make us achieve these goals. Because realistically, when you showed a slide and you showed the rollbacks of the federal policies, from my perspective, it was missing some very important changes, which is that the cuts in Medicaid and SNAP are going to cause the legislature to want to backfill some of that money. And I'm deeply concerned that they're going to raid the CEF and other climate dollars to try and backfill human services, which will leave us naked when we want to get our climate goals achieved. Also very concerned, I must say, not only with DOGE cutting vital agencies and resources on climate, that the state government buyouts may encourage some of our best and brightest to leave state government, when instead we should be looking at what programs we want to retain and making sure that our staffing aligns with the programs that give us the best value for our taxpayers. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's for all of us, this is a pretty sobering message, and I want to thank MDE staff for keeping us sober. But all kidding aside, it's tough. I mean, most of us have spent our careers working on this, and the hill got almost too steep to even climb over. But I do feel that what you said up front, Chris, that University of Maryland identified is that there's the opportunities for non-federal actors to really move into place. And that includes us, that includes the private sector, it includes academics, et cetera. So I think that there's opportunities that we should be seizing. And one of the things that's not on this slide, and I'd like to put Secretary Kurtz on the, I give him an opportunity, because I do think that this is a great time to invest in the other side of the equation. You know, how do we build resiliency? How do we make sure that our defense systems, our environmental defense systems are as strong as they can? And, you know, maybe we're having trouble reducing the emissions over here, but by God, we're strengthening the resiliency. And I think that's a great role for this commission to continue to put forward. And I know your agency has been working on it. So I'll turn it over to you. The other area that I do think we just have got to be creative about, and I was appreciative, Madam Secretary, about it, and that's transportation. It's the largest source. It engages everybody. We've got to figure out mechanisms. And with Darren at the helm, I think we're in good shape. But I also am glad to see the working group is still in place and focused. So those two areas for me, I would suggest that this commission continue to really hone in on. The last piece is the point that Jennifer's made, and that is making sure that whatever we're doing is the most effective and efficient use of our resources. And Paul and I have talked about this with the CEF dollars, with agency dollars. You're really smart about those expenses. So those three thoughts.
Thanks, Kim. I'm happy to pick up on that. I think one of the places we're still seeing strong support is the things that are sequestration driven and resiliency driven, right? I think the great thing about resiliency is it's a lot, to Jennifer's point about talking to people, it's a lot easier of a sell because we're providing an additional benefit. It's not just the climate impact, it's reduction of risk. There's some really interesting insurance products that are coming online that we've been looking at and discussing at the Adaptation Resilience Work Group and across several agencies of state government. I think you look at some of our most effective natural climate solutions. We've got over 1 million trees in the ground through 5 Million Trees program, working really well. MDE, MDA, and DNR to deliver on that. We're continuing to see the increase in living shorelines restored. Wetlands has been a little bit of a challenge, but we've really leaned into cost-effective solutions that we really weren't thinking about before. We aren't building wetlands anymore. We're building runnels, which are very, very inexpensive, but preserve wetlands for longer and can help us do that restoration. And then we're keeping the foot on the gas on land conservation, which is a key climate strategy and a key buffering of future impacts of climate change. This past year is the second, besides 2009, when we bought a significant amount of land directly from the Catholic Church. Last year was the best year in program open space history. And so I think a lot of those areas in the natural climate solution space, we're still a leader. You look at the best management practices that MDA is putting in the ground every year, continuing to grow that program. You know, we've got a really engaged agricultural community in that space too. I think there's, our government talks a lot about being asset rich and strategy poor. I think that's a space where we have a really good set of assets and frankly, strategies that are really starting to take effect. So I think, I don't want to sound biased, right? Obviously, I'm always interested in doing more work in those spaces. But I do think that that's a key piece that we have as an asset for ourselves that provides multiple benefits. And we're going to continue to keep the foot on the pedal on those.
I have a follow-up question. So would you say that, when we look at the federal impacts or the potential impacts from the federal rollbacks, do you feel, are they as extensive for the resiliency area?
Well, I would say resiliency is a tougher one, and I would defer that question more to Mike, to Mike Hinson and MDEM. I know the FEMA cuts are substantial. There's a lot of big ticket items like brick. But they can get into more detail on that. I would say the federal landscape for what we're looking at right now has not been impacted as quickly as some of these other spaces. But there are some underlying impacts that we're all dealing with, right? new terms and conditions on grants. That has nothing to do with what we're trying to actually put in the ground, but it's things that in ways that we won't operate. And so there are other hurdles that are being thrown in front of us at the federal level that I do believe will cause some of that funding for those type of programs to be restricted and constricted. But that's a space where we, the state, have always been a national leader, right? With the Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Funds, the Bay Restoration Fund, MAPS program at MDA. We're still, as a state, fully funding those programs. I do think we are lined up for in the future to feel some more pain in those spaces from federal funds, though.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I want to second the point that Kim made about transportation maybe being one of those, in terms of those slices up there, that where could we focus our attention, that transportation could very well be one of them. I mean, with, as the chairman said, I mean, EV sales have, the rate of increase has slowed, but there may be, even without the $7,500 federal tax credit, opportunities to get that at a higher rate. And I think the ACC2 and ACT work group, one of the discussions we had last week was, let's come up with some recommendations for state policy for increasing EV sales. I mean, we know that range anxiety is still a problem, and the best way to address that is more charging stations. And there may be some other marketing ideas that, working with the dealers who are heavily invested already in EV models and other groups to try to push up the adoption of EVs, or even, I mean, I realize that ACC2 focuses primarily on EVs and plug-in hybrids, but can we focus not on get people to adopt EVs, maybe the plug-in hybrids. So I think there's some potential upside there we could explore.
If I can follow up on that, when the Moore administration came in, most EV investments were for private garages. People got a rebate. Well, not everyone has a garage, particularly working poor families. So we have pivoted to investing more in public-facing chargers, exactly to the delegate's point. So we are much more focused. We think the other program will come to an end. It was actually state mandated, legislatively mandated. It comes to an end. We are putting more and more money into public-facing chargers at apartments, commercial, downtowns, whatever, to address that very problem. And in fact, we're working with the Department of Agriculture to start to look at all of the chargers around the state to assess whether they are up or not. I've had too many problems, and other people have too many problems where the goddamn things don't work. And so we are going to assess that and call them to task, whether they are funded by us or not. So that's on the agenda. So I think at MEA, we agree that there are things we can do in the transportation sector. Let me make two other quick comments. On the pie chart, you've got a building fuel use. And as was said by the secretary, BEPS was then climate solution now act, which says any building over 35,000 square feet should reduce greenhouse gas by 20% by 2031, and then by 2045 be carbon net neutral. I think it behooves all of us to not retreat on that, because there are some forces that want us to retreat. And I don't want to put anyone in the hot seat, Mike. But there are organizations we know, NIOP, IOBA, that see this as a major expenditure. We think ultimately it's going to be a savings. Having clean energy and having a heat pump instead of a gas-powered HVAC or whatever. There's a lot of flexibility here. By December, every building should have done their baseline numbers. Not every building has done it so far. They've got another 4 or 5 months, but that we hope will be done. And we at MEA will give technical support. We can't write checks for that new heat pump conversion, but we can give technical support and bring people together to help make this more palatable. But I think we really cannot retreat on that. You know, after transportation is number one in greenhouse gas emissions, buildings are number two. I mean, if we ignore that, we can put our head in the sand, but that is the fact. That is the fact. And finally, I want to mention the final one, because it's moved to the fore, and that is utility rates and the relationship of clean energy to utility rates. Now, we can't sit here, at least at MEA, and say, tomorrow you're going to start savings. I mean, obviously you get a payback for any kind of clean energy project. But we think in the long term, and I don't want to define what is a midterm and long term, we think it will save money for ratepayers. And we know, particularly in the Baltimore region, PG&E, opposed to HEPCO, where it's not rising quite as much, that over the next 5 or 10 years, that's not going down. It's not going down. So we think, and a lot of people, you know, are hearing the concerns about utility rates, as we should be sensitive to it. There's some might be pandering to it, but we need to also look at that as part and parcel of, one, the messaging, and two, the reality. And running the models 10 or 12, 15 years out get complicated because you don't know what the actual cost will be in terms of utility rates and how much they increase, so what the savings will be. But I think that's got to enter into the equation as we proceed down this path.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. To follow up on what Delegate Stein and Director Pinsky were saying, two thoughts. On the transportation piece, agreed, there's a lot that can still be done in the work group that's ongoing. I would encourage you all to look at the previous commission reports. I know you all have been around for a long time and know that there's been a lot of recommendations from this commission to increase the sale of electric vehicles outside of ACC and ACT. And so we had a really robust, I remember the mitigation working group a number of years ago had a pretty robust recommendation about a new structure for the incentive programs that the state can fund. And might need some tweaks around the edges now, but there's a lot of information in previous commission reports. So I would encourage that. And then on the last piece that, last two pieces that Director Pinsky was discussing, I think that there's an opportunity for this commission to recognize some of the challenges that Commissioner Mizrahi also mentioned in terms of the additional burden that is about to be placed, especially on low-income households across the country and in the state of Maryland, with reductions in healthcare supports as well as food supports. And to compound that with now the latest analysis that I'm seeing is that household energy costs, because of the reconciliation package passed by Congress, are going to go out nationally on average by another $200 at least. So we're looking at another round of energy costs going on to low-income households in Maryland, not just because of the electric rates that we're already seeing increase across the state. And so how can we leverage the recommendation actions that we can take and lean in on solutions that will reduce household energy costs in addition to reducing emissions? And that leans into energy efficiency and reducing the building fuel use section of this pie as well. Because again, electrification is efficiency. A heat pump is 3 to 4 times more efficient than a gas furnace. And if we also have additional support from our Public Service Commission partners to restrict the actual monthly costs on low-income households and their energy bills, I know there's a working group on that right now, and we should see a report with recommendations from them soon to limit those impacts. I think that we can be investing even more so in electrification and energy efficiency, and that has a wealth of an additional multitude of benefits so that we are reducing monthly household costs. I think that's critical to make sure that people can stay in their homes when their monthly bills are going up in all sorts of other places, make sure that kids can go to school for it because they don't have to spend as much money on energy bills. And it really is this, I think, a really central point that if we are investing in homes through efficiency, that's our little sector of the pie here, we can really make sure that we are having a multitude of benefits outside of our original scope. So that's one area I would like us to see revisit a little bit more in how we are approaching that building sector piece in particular, because I think it has a lot of downstream benefits for us.
Thank you so much.
Line, perhaps David Lapp has his hand up online and we'll return it over.
Yeah,
Okay, David Lapp,
we'll be back.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
we don't hear you. Check if it's an issue on our end.
It looks like my mic is working. No?
Meanwhile, let's just.
Why don't we, while we work through the speaker, so everyone, yeah, so it sounds like it's on our end, since others online can hear David. So while Mark works through, and come back to David.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Okay, you are now. Hi, Darren. Yes, David, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We do hear you, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, great. So building off of the comments from Secretary Kurtz and Director Pinsky, just focusing on the building fuel use. I think there's definitely room there, and that's something where the state has a lot more control. We know that we can't reach the climate goals without substantial reductions in gas consumption, and yet the state is still, through its utilities, investing about $750 million a year through the three largest gas utilities in long-lived gas infrastructure. So that's gas infrastructure that is paid out by customers over 50, 60, 70 years even. And so those investments, we can walk back those investments smartly and safely and save customers money. And that's something within the state's control. The state regulates pervasively, extensively, the utilities within its jurisdiction. And so that's an opportunity. And we saw from the commission, we have a very recent order in the future of gas proceeding on gas line extension policy for new customers. And we did an analysis showing that elimination of those subsidies that existing customers pay for new gas customers just over the next about 10 years will save ratepayer costs by about $1 billion. Of course, that policy that the PSC recently adopted and sent for rulemaking, it's going to be challenged by some of the same interests that Director Pinsky pointed out. And so we need to back up that policy because it's smart policy and it's great for ratepayers. It'll reduce costs, for the state. But we also need to look at other gas infrastructure spending. That $750 million a year, about somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 of that is for connecting new customers to the gas system. And so there's lots of other gas infrastructure spending that we need to look at. And that's part of the future of gas proceeding. So that proceeding is really important, and that's something that the state can advance with less risk from the administration federally. So I'm sure there's going to be some reaction to that, but this is cost savings and this is beneficial, and it advances state climate policy.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
David. Turning back to the room, yes, Darren.
Yeah, so I appreciate the focus on transportation especially, and I just wanted to inject a little bit of optimism into the discussion on vehicle efficiency and electrification. We've seen emissions actually continue to remain at a level, a plateau level, or even declining because of increasing vehicle efficiency and because of increasing electrification, although that's a smaller base. But the electrification piece has really moved substantially I don't know if you all know the Zero Emission Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council. It's been around since 2011, when it was the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council, quite simply. And there were a few hundred EVs on the road back then. And now there are almost 140,000 EVs out. And there are a lot of public chargers out there, a lot more than people realize. There are more than 1,400 public charging stations with about 4,300 ports or plugs for people to plug into. So in terms of our charging network, we need to deal with reliability, but we also largely need to fill in gaps and deserts right now, right? So we need to leverage our funding strategically in order to make sure that Maryland is EV ready in terms of charging infrastructure. That's especially important because regulatory tools are threatened, as we know, and incentives or consumer sweeteners are also in trouble, thanks to the reconciliation. Having said that, part of the reason I'm optimistic is that the tech has improved dramatically. Quality of it, my family just bought an Ioniq 5. It's got a range of more than 400 miles when it's full. It's just fantastic. And we love it. And it wasn't that expensive. The price point on these cars has also dropped. We have more offerings, higher quality, relatively lower price points. And then the total cost of ownership, it's clear that an EV costs you less in terms of total cost than internal combustion engine cars. So I think we're facing headwinds, but we're going to continue to see uptake of EVs. We just need to keep that momentum going. But the other piece, the thing that I'm more worried about is traffic levels, aggregate traffic levels. And that comes around to the vehicle miles of travel goal we have in our long range plan that we need to focus on addressing those as well. And this was, after all, at some point, the state that popularized the term smart growth. We've been focused on transit-oriented development and other means of making sure that we actually help provide people with other choices in terms of transportation, other choices in addition to driving, right, to help reduce aggregate traffic. And that's something we need to focus on too. So, yeah, so I appreciate the focus on transportation. I realize we're the largest emitting sector, and it's a responsibility to contribute, therefore, to solving this issue. And I'm actually more optimistic than I would have been certainly a decade ago about the electrification picture, especially in spite of the headwinds.
Appreciate that.
Question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
question. Okay, go ahead. Then.
A question for, I don't know if it's Chris or Director Pinsky, in terms of the Reggie program review that was just approved. I haven't read in all the details. Are there projections for additional, or what the revenue structure is going to look like moving forward, or the amount that we may be getting into the state over the next, what is it, through 2035 as the cap goes down or so? Is there any kind of information, or is that making you all feel a little more optimistic about how much money may be coming into the CEF, or is it going to start to decline through the Reggie auction process?
Yeah, so we released the outcomes of the regional program review where the Reggie states, there are 10 of us, all convene and look forward to the program and say, what should it look like in the future? And just a few weeks ago, the state all announced that we'd come to agreements, posted information on what the program is going to look like at a regional level. And now we all are turning around to implement that in our individual state regulations. So now there will be an MDE rulemaking. Just for everyone who missed that news, it was on July 3rd. It was a busy news day. And it was great news. It's a good, strong outcome, consensus across all 10 Reggie states, which is Maryland up through Maine, all the states on the East Coast. And it should have the effect of stabilizing revenues into CEF from Reggie by providing certainty to the market for what the program is going to look like, what the cap is going to be for the next 12 years out through 2037. So in that sense, it should stabilize things. The market has clear long-term goals to plan around. Over time, though, the cap will get smaller, right? Because that's sort of the point. It's a carbon cap. All the power plants are going to get quite a bit smaller over the next couple of decades. The amount of revenue the state gets is based on what the cap is and what the allowance price is, because we sell all the tons that constitute the cap as allowances at quarterly allowance auctions. So if the cap is tighter, we're selling fewer allowances. On the other hand, the value of an individual allowance goes up. So we don't have a specific revenue projection. But anyone who would like to make their own, we provide extensive modeling of this so you can see what the cap would be and how many allowances we'd be selling every year and what our estimate of the price would be. So I guess short answer is it ought to be stabilized, but the idea is that it's not going to be around forever. And that as we get closer to 0 tons in the electricity system, that's also getting closer to raising no money through the auctions because there are no tons for which a carbon price would be paid. That would still be a very far off thing, though. That's not in the next 5 years or even 10 years.
Thanks.
Secretary, I had to step out. Brian, you were next.
Sure. I'd like to add mentions on the program review success. I know it's been a long road. It kicked off about 4 years ago, I believe. So this is taking quite some time, and I think we ended up in a really solid place. I just want to sort of follow on to some of the comments that have been made about transportation. About passenger vehicle traffic. What do people drive because they have no alternatives, or the alternatives are simply across a range of criteria. Walking, cycling, e-scooters, it's simply too dangerous, or at a minimum, very unpleasant for a lot of people. I'm speaking from experience. I live in Baltimore City. I travel a mile to my office. Every single day I'll encounter some bizarre and frightening experience with a driver it's just been my experience living in Baltimore City. And I suppose I would venture to guess that it's like this for people all across Maryland and beyond. Traveling by commuter rail, I often travel to Washington, D.C. I always take the MARC. It is very unreliable. It's gone from a situation in which, I expect to be a bit late now and then to a situation where I'm not sure if I'm actually going to be able to reach my destination. And it's especially bad in the summertime when we know that there are issues with thermal problems with the tracks not being aligned and not allowing trains to travel at a reasonable speed. So some of the policies that can enable climate action may not look exactly like climate change policy. It could be things like lowered speed limits, right? Or the fact that speed cameras are triggered at 12 miles above the speed limit. Maybe that should be brought down lower, right? To make it more palatable for people to pursue alternatives. Our commuter rail system, there's a lot to unpack there. And it's beyond the purview of this body, I think, to address all these issues, but there may be ways to partner with other agencies and initiatives that make these alternatives more appealing to a wider variety of travelers.
Yeah, we are running a little bit behind. We should probably switch soon, but I think, how many remaining comments do we have on this topic?
One.
Mike Powell. Okay, let's just give Mike the last word on this one.
because I'm gonna bring it back to the comment you made about more bang for the buck. And I think that's the analysis we need, is how much CO2 reduction and co-benefits do we get for the expenditure of certain resources? Because the rest of the Trump administration, we're going to be playing defense. That's the reality. And we're going to be in a time of limited resources at the same time, not just money in the state budget, but staff at the state level, and the attention of the General Assembly with so much else going on. So I do think it's important for us to try to see where, for expenditure of a certain amount of resources, we get the most reduction. It may not be doing everything. It may be doing certain things, or it may be doing a little of everything, but we need that analysis.
Have to run. Please continue this great conversation. Thank you for taking
My
over.
pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, Secretary. Thanks, everyone, for the creative thinking. That's the kind of thinking we need now. I heard a lot of good ideas that we can follow up on. So the Secretary is at a run for a meeting on the Hill. So Kim, you're in charge. On the
Everybody's worst nightmare.
On the agenda, we were going to turn to the presentation of the comptroller on cost of inaction. I understand the comptroller had to go, but Kim Pez is here. I can present those slides. I know the secretary wanted to convey at the top that that's important because as we think about all these tough questions about how to reduce greenhouse gases, how much it's going to cost, how are we going to do it, we always need to remember why we're doing it. And why it's so crucial that we do secure these reductions and meet these goals, that they're not just numbers on a piece of paper. They're real things for real people. And so we were appreciative that the formed this study and then came to present to us. Anything else you'd like to say before we finish?
Just a quick 30-second commercial. I had the honor of joining the comptroller at the announcement of the report and really want to applaud her and the office leadership on this. It's unique, as far as I know, a first effort on a comptroller's part to really look at this. So hats off to you guys for the work.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And the comptroller does send her regrets. She was able to join us for the first hour, but she did have another obligation for an hour. So as her climate resilience director and proxy for her position here on the commission, I'll do this presentation for you and I look forward to it. Thanks for your time and attention to this. So yes, this is a first of its kind report that the comptroller's office did. It's part of a series called the State Spending Series. The first report we did was actually on the cost of transit. Speaking of transportation, so check that out. We did a report on why transit costs so much in the state of Maryland, and maybe some solutions for that. So then we moved on, next slide please, to this State Spending Series. So part of the role of the comptroller is to ensure that our state government works better for Marylanders and delivers the best possible value for your tax dollars. This year, we launched this new series of reports, and they examine how we invest in infrastructure, what drives costs up, and what best practices help us deliver projects on time, on budget, and with lasting impact. For people to trust government, as you alluded to, we must demonstrate to them that we can get things done using our taxpayer dollars in a way that benefits communities and now and in the future. And we must act boldly to be effective. So this latest report is the next step in that work. And it's a part of our series. It says share lessons learned about state expenses. Next slide. So why did we do this report? Well, you all know this, climate change is already costing us. Extreme weather linked to climate change is expensive and the costs are rising. Across the US, we've experienced more than 400 major climate disasters over the past 45 years, costing taxpayers a staggering almost $3 trillion. Here in Maryland, we faced 85 extreme weather events in that same time frame, damages about $10 to $20 billion. These events devastate our infrastructure, our roads, our buildings, our power grids, sewer systems, and paralyze communities. The economic ripple effects are immense. Next slide. So what's covered in this report? Well, we outline the categories and types of costs associated with climate change, including extreme weather, also impacts to human health, nature, infrastructure, and the economy. We have three sections. The first is the cost of action, inaction. The second is the cost of action. And the last is paying for mitigation and resilience. Next slide. Here's just a few bullet points of the cost of inaction. This section includes broader compounding economic pressures that climate change creates. And while we don't know the total cost of inaction, this report did not calculate those. We do know the consequences. Again, generally the few of them are economic instability, widening health disparities, increasing property insurance rates, irreversible environmental damage. And less revenue means less funding for other priorities like education, infrastructure. And this section covers all of those things. The next slide is the cost of action. You've heard that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that is not just true for our health, it's true for our climate. According to a report from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce last year, for every dollar invested in resilience and disaster preparedness, returns $13 in avoided damages and recovery costs. Now, this is an extraordinary value proposition. So this section outlines the investments required to build climate resilience across climate hazards. Next slide. Final section covers a range of strategies to finance mitigation and resilience efforts. How are we going to pay for these important measures? We're in a bit of a budget crisis and federal funding cuts are not helping us. So we have some great funding programs, but we need more. Over the year, we will continue to work with partners to discuss funding and financing opportunities. And to summarize, last slide, climate change is not a distant threat. We know that it's a present day cost. We are paying for it today. But if we act with intention and foresight, can mitigate these costs, protect our communities, and build a stronger Maryland. The time to act is now. And last slide is just a link to the report. You can check it out online. I brought some paper copies here today as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Any questions or thoughts, feedback?
Just one, because I mean, I get this all the time from the business community. When you do the cost of inaction, right, you have to make assumptions about what the rest of the world and certainly the rest of the US is doing, right? Because if Maryland does something and the rest of the US does nothing, right, then the causation is an issue. I don't question that cost of inaction by the world has dire consequences. I don't question that we need to do something about CO2, but it's why I tend to focus on what's the cost of getting this many million tons of CO2 out of the air, rather than what is the cost savings to Maryland to spend this money. Because you can argue that if we do it and nobody else does it, then have we achieved that amount of cost savings? Now, there's some things we do achieve, right, in there. But there are, I mean, with the electric vehicles cheaper to run than a gas vehicle. But what kind of assumptions do you make, or is this the cost of inaction by the world as opposed to cost of inaction by the Maryland?
So this is generally cost of inaction, I would say, like nationally and worldwide, not just for the state of Maryland. So your points that you're making are again, we didn't actually calculate. This was sort of an initial just a list of all of the things to think about. There is going to be perhaps a future study on that'll actually calculate these costs. And then we'll figure out that's,
Sure.
you know, between Maryland versus national.
Gotcha.
Jennifer.
First of all, I think this is a great report, so I want to congratulate the Controller's Office, Lehrman and Kim for doing this and the team. But I do want to point out to Michael Powell's very smart question that a lot more work is needed to be done. And our shared commission really did recommend that in our last report last year. And the legislature passed important legislation to do a much stronger study, which unfortunately the governor vetoed. So I'd like to ask Kim, if there is a veto override, would the Controller's Office be prepared and interested in completing that study to get the rest of those numbers done in a more specific and helpful way?
Of course. I mean, absolutely. In fact, we are continuing conversations with environmental organizations and consultants. I've met with a few consultants that would be able to do this work for our state. And so there's some movement abound to make this to happen.
David.
Comment and a question for Kim. Mike, to your point, I appreciate we need to be looking globally as well at actors across the continuum. But I don't really like the hypothetical of if we do something but no one else does. I mean, we're part of the U.S. Climate Alliance with 25 plus other governors are committed to this action. We're not in the Paris agreements anymore, but everybody else still is. As Director Pinsky said, the Chinese sales of electric vehicles are skyrocketing. I think that we are a part of a movement and we need to contribute to it and we need to do our part for it. So I find that, I get your point, but the hypothetical behind that I think is long since passed, about like 28 years ago.
I think the arguments are that we need to do our fair share and that we should try to set an example for other people. I just have a little bit of trouble when somebody says, okay, we have this many fewer deaths if we do X. If the world does it or if the US does it, I think maybe you can do that calculation. I don't know.
I think there's also a lot of co-benefits associated with, especially the public health numbers there. We're talking about criteria air pollutant reduction when we're getting that as a co-benefit of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So I still have a lot of faith in those numbers. I think I'll move on from it, but my curious question, I loved the green bond recommendation. I would get very quickly over my skis if I were to talk about that. So I'm really honestly curious how the comptroller's office is looking at that opportunity, if the legislature needs to support that, if this commission needs to be talking more about the opportunity for green bonds or other financing mechanisms for us to leverage in that space.
To be honest, can I add a subset? Also, if you could speak to the polluter pay, and if you're looking at larger than, and there's the new act, but there's also clean fuel standards and.
So as a climate scientist type person, rather than a fiscal person, I am learning things more about the fiscal side of things, and green bonds is one of those things that is on my to learn about list, and I haven't dug into it yet. More so what we're digging into or starting to look into is a statewide resilience finance strategy or resilience finance plan, which could include multiple things that we both discussed. But I have not personally dug into any one of those. So that's beginning. That work is beginning.
Okay.
Consultants about it.
We have a question from Russ online, and then Delegate Stein.
I'd be happy to ask it. It's more of a statement that the co-benefits from electric vehicles and other measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on criteria pollutants and other pollutants that have major health effects that are not recognized by the EPA are substantial, and the economic benefit probably exceeds that from global greenhouse gas emissions reductions.
Thanks, Russ. Good point. Delegate Stein?
Thanks. I look forward to reading the report, and this is a great summary. And just want to highlight one of the items you mentioned, the rising cost of insurance. As I'm sure everyone here knows, states, California, Florida, some others that are been hit by natural disasters, in addition to rising sea level rises. Insurance, I think California just approved a 24% increase in housing premiums. That was on top of something similar last year. Now, we're not at that point yet, but home insurance is going up, and there may come a day that, like some of these other states which have been disaster prone and where they are vulnerable to sea level rise, insurance companies may leave the market, and that'll create its own major crisis. So I guess my question is, I think MIA is aware of this, so I don't know if there's any discussion with them.
Actually, the comptroller is very concerned about this as well. And so several months ago, we joined forces with the Maryland Insurance Administration to create a sort of unofficial interagency working group. In fact, we've had one meeting already and another next week to talk about insurance, climate change, and the market. So we're looking into that.
That is great.
Good to know.
And I know Secretary Kurtz mentioned insurance products, so we have staff that will be joining that meeting next week. So.
Great. Robin?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. And to the comptroller too. As you know,
You're frozen.
it's so hard to,
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. It's so hard to estimate the cost benefit of inaction and health issues avoided. But I was wondering if you looked at asthma and respiratory issues and cardiovascular issues as well.
So we have, we didn't calculate individual health conditions, but we definitely have health related illnesses and deaths generally and overall as one of the topics of costs of inaction. Now, if this study proceeds, a statewide study on the actual cost, calculating, modeling them, that would be included. If it does, that data exists, yeah.
Thank you, Robin. Secretary Kurtz?
Thank you, Kim. And I just want to pick up on the insurance piece. We had a discussion with a representative from Howden and Blue Movement, who helped develop the blue bonds for Israel and a couple other countries. And one of the things that they impressed upon us was the importance of working in the reinsurance space to get to a parametric insurance model, which allows for a couple things. One is basically a set of metrics that would trigger payouts instead of actually going out and doing assessments of property damage. And the opportunity that it creates for a state or a sovereign nation to play a role of basically consolidating insurance for private landowners, taking on some of the risk without taking on the capital expense, and then being able to leverage the payouts in a very, very quick amount of time if there's an issue. It's a very different model for insurance than we see in the US, frankly, anywhere. But it is being demonstrated at the global scale in other nations. And I think the other piece to that is they impress upon us, you have to be very creative with your payback. And so what they're seeing is in other countries, basically, if you think about from the DNR perspective, we have the Coastal Bays Trust Fund. We use that to make grants, right? That is a discrete amount of money every year. They are taking funds like that and turning those into massive technical assistance funds in other countries, and then using the bond to actually procure all of the projects. So it's a way to get to a much larger scale, but it does require a significant amount more of a role for the government to play within the insurance market. So just flagging, it would be, I think, a rather fundamental shift to think about it at that scale, but there might be kind of points in between, or maybe we want to go that big. I don't know. But there's a lot of really interesting things going on at the federal level or the international level in terms of really leveraging our reinsurance markets.
Any other comments or questions for Kim? Thank you. And thanks to the comptroller too. So now we are turning to Amy, I believe, right? To share with us about the teach-in, which was something we supported. Amy, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Great. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you. And Jabari is with me as well. So we're really happy to provide the commission with some good news. Something good that really happened in the last couple of months which was the Maryland Climate Teach-In. So next slide. Great. So the Teach-In is an annual event. We've been holding in April for the last 3 years. And basically it's a focus on climate change education, climate change awareness, and solution. And it's focused, or it brings together educators. We have students, and it's actually also community members, and we discuss climate change, just building that awareness from kind of the ground up, all ages, all kinds of educational opportunities. Next slide. Great. So, the ECO working group came up with, kind of developed the idea for the climate teach-in based on a worldwide program by Bard College. Basically, it reaches out to nonprofits, people that are in social clubs, faith-based organizations. We even had private businesses sign up this year. We had state government, as well as educators across the state. And they could, as a participant in the climate teach-in, host any kind of activity where they were increasing or offering education and awareness around climate change. And there was a lot, a huge variety of different ways that these brilliant educators implemented this, from, typical things like tree plantings or stream cleanups or nature walks to, art exhibits for, designing your own climate change superhero. Lots of Earth Day celebrations, lots of Q&As. We had a group go to the planetarium. You're going to see a picture of that a little bit later. We even had a clothes swap. So many different ways that educators, enacted this. And next slide. And you can see some of the pictures here. Some elementary school kids sorting trash. There's an Earth Day event on the right. This was the top center was an author who had kind of a talk and a discussion on plants and hope and community. And then, even simple as just learning lessons about glaciers. Next slide. So, ECO's been organizing this for 3 years, but we have to call out some people that really came out for us this year. The Mizrahi Family Charitable Fund sponsored the event, as well as EA Engineering, Science and Technology. Both of those organizations donated funds so that we could award educators, and we actually awarded one educator a $2,000 grant to take their students on an environmental field trip. Two other educators were awarded $500 grants to have an environmental project at their institution. And then the Maryland Association for Environment and Outdoor Education was a huge partner, and they're actually administering those grants for us. The State Department of Education was a huge partner with us this year, really getting the word out to all of the to the local education agencies. MDE held their own event, DNR held their own event, and Attune actually donated air quality monitors for some of our schools. So, I mean, the event each year has grown. This was our first year with true sponsors, and we're hoping to actually, expand this next year. And next slide. And it was a huge success. First year we had about 25 participants. Last year we had 70 some. This year we had 220 individual registrations. We actually crossed the entire state, which is amazing. And 65 different, so 220 educators, 65 different organizations represented in that. So 3x increase, 3x increase from last year. Next slide, and you can see some more pictures of the events. There's just so many great ways that, and you can see it's all over Towson University, North Dorchester Middle School, even a primary day school. So we had a lot of private schools participate with us this year. Next slide. And this is just, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but the amazing list. Note that the school systems themselves, with the exception of Prince George's County, the school systems themselves did not participate as an administration. We had educators from those school systems sign up. Some of the school systems were pretty wary about participating at the administration level. Prince George's County was all in. They directed a huge program of outreach with their teachers, 63 educators, just amazing. The three are that are highlighted are the ones with the most participation. Barnesville School is a private school, Towson University, obviously University of Maryland. Next slide. Just a few more pictures. You can see Towson University at their planetarium. We had a stream cleanup. Nature observations, so many great ways. And we also had a kickoff event ourselves, and this involved a lot of representation from the commission, and Javari's going to talk about that if he can get on. I know he's on the call.
Yep, I'm here. Yep. Okay. Y'all can hear me?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so thank you, Amy. This is, the kickoff event was pretty much, I guess you could say, the icing on the cake. It was our second.
Next slide. Yeah, next slide, Mark.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, next slide. And it was actually our second, I think Amy mentioned, our second annual kickoff event. This was held in Elkton, Maryland, which is the home of the, actually Cecil County School of Technology. That school was chosen because it was the home of the Cecil County Teacher of the Year, which became our teach-in spokesperson.
Next slide.
And yeah, I might be kind of jumping around, so the slides may or may not, coincide with the overall event. But Brittany Rigdon was, again, the Cecil County Teacher of the Year, and she specializes in landscaping and horticulture. And the main goal of the event actually was to obviously serve as an official kickoff for the teach-in, even though this year we included events throughout the entire month of April, but also to be an educational session for the students at the school, for them to hear from us, and also so that we can hear from them. You can probably go to the next slide too. But the event consisted of 2 sessions with 2 different groups of kids. We opened with CCST's own Brittany Rigdon, who gave an intro to the occasion. And then our own commissioner, Secretary McElwain, gave us a glimpse of what climate change means, how greenhouse gases work, the recent impacts of climate change, highlighting recent events, especially in Maryland.
She mentioned what had been accomplished thus far and what we hope to accomplish in the future, and also provide encouragement to the students of finding ways to integrate climate change into their respective careers. And by the way, these careers span a wide range of different subjects: landscaping and horticulture, HVAC, electrical engineering, cosmetology, IT, agricultural science, just to name a few. But then we had 4 table discussions led by facilitators who were essentially the adults in the room, as well as a small group of college students that came with me from Bowie State. And the discussions were, I think there were 4 different topics, ranging from advocacy, personal choice, workforce development, etc. The first group of students, there are 2 different sessions. The first group of students stayed for the lunch, as the second group came in to join us for lunch so that we could all eat together. Lunch was prepared by the school chef and the culinary program right there at the school. We had a sustainable meal, included chicken kebabs, which was chicken raised on site, quinoa and grilled asparagus, locally grown. We ate off of compostable lunchware. We had water, and then the food and lunchware was placed for composting. During lunch, the secretary presented Governor Moore's proclamation for the 2025 Climate Teaching Week in Maryland, and then Amy and myself presented the Redbud tree to the school in honor of the event, and that Redbud was donated by DNR. So overall, it was an incredible event. We learned a lot from the students. They learned a lot from us, and it was very successful. And I think that pretty much wraps it up, unless Amy has anything else to add. Those are just some of the pictures of the event as well.
And the only other thing is I did a quick calculation this morning, just based on some of the numbers of students that each participant registered. And not every participant told us the exact number of students, but I mean, just based on the number of educators registered and guesstimates on their student bodies, we probably reached more than 10,000 students with this event. And that is just goes so far in normalizing just regular discussions on climate change, talking about it in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different environments. So just a really great feel-good story and success for the commission.
Yes.
I couldn't say it any better. And Amy and Jabari and Jennifer, I really do, on behalf of the commission, want to thank you for your leadership on this. I think it's more than a feel-good story. I mean, it's basically the future of this issue for us.
Yes.
And some of us are older than others, and we're on our way out. And that the folks that you talked to and engaged with are the future. And I can't think of a more important audience. So great work. We'll shoot for 20,000 next year. So well done.
That's great.
Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Keep up the great work, you guys.
Thank you.
So that leaves us with public comment.
It does. Please correct me. I did not see anyone online give their name for public comment yet. If there are any public participants online and you'd like to get on the list, please put your name in the chat right now. While we wait for that, are there any members of the public in the room who would like to offer comment? If you could just raise your hand so we can get a quick count. If so.
We have one over here. Over there.
We have one. Okay. All right. We have one in the room. So we'll start in the room. I'm still not seeing any online. If you wouldn't mind, welcome, thanks. We're looking forward to your comment. If you wouldn't mind coming up over here where the microphones can pick you up and start by introducing yourself and your name. And if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, we'd appreciate it. Thanks so much. Go ahead.
You can stand right there.
Oh, is there a second one over there? Okay, great. Well, please go. Yeah, from here, if you project the microphone, I'll pick you up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Kosofsky. I'm a rising senior at Towson High School. Right now, I'm interning with Delegate Stein, and I'm really excited to be here. So first, I'd say please do not lower the speed limit below 12 miles per hour. That's I'd have a lot more tickets than I have right now. But I think that the reason we all fight for a better environment is to ensure that future generations are not subjected to the mistakes of the past. And this comes from a desire to build a stronger community where people are interconnected without the worry of an existential environmental catastrophe. I also believe that we're living in an increasingly lonely world, one where people go an entire day without seeing another person. This is why I believe it is essential that Maryland focuses on developing stronger public transportation infrastructure. Not only would doing so tackle many of the environmental problems caused by a car-centered community, but also increase job access, stimulate economic growth through increased accessibility, reduce transportation costs, and so much more. Our responsibility is to protect the environment. Why not do so while addressing other core concerns directly related to this issue? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. And I think we had another, would you like to respond, Jennifer? Or-
No, absolutely.
Okay, great. We had another comment back here. Is that right? Okay. All right. Any other public comment in the room? Okay, and we have none online, so that concludes public comment. But I think, Jennifer, you had something.
I would like to comment that there is still time to get your Ionic. And there are incentives that are still in place. And I hope that everybody in this room will figure out what incentives are left and to advertise those and to encourage people to take advantage of them as quickly as possible. Because if somebody gets an electric car today, that's many future years of saved greenhouse gas problems. And so we shouldn't just pretend that it's all over with these. We still have, I think, until September 1.
September 30th.
September 30th, and there are other incentives. And I don't know if people can advertise what's the comprehensive list of what's still out there, but I think that it would be great for us all to push on this.
And the solar panels too, built it for a little while.
Thanks.
Now you have something to do this afternoon.
Yes.
I so appreciate the comments of Delegate Stein's intern, and I wanted to introduce the Able Foundation has two wonderful interns with us, Mia Freeman on the left and Jordan Johnson, that wanted to come to the meeting today and observe the discussion, and I'm sure we'll have a nice conversation afterwards about what's been discussed here, but appreciate the opportunity for the public comment and the meeting, and appreciate all the presentations today.
And thank you for joining us. Glad you're here. Glad you guys are here too. Really. We want you to take our jobs, so come back. Anybody online with any comments before we wrap it up?
Maybe I'll note that the next meeting is September 16th from 1 to 3. That will be when we take up the recommendations from the working groups for the first recommendation deliberation session for the fall. Thank you all very much for your thoughts today. Looking forward to seeing you again in a couple of months as we work toward our set of annual recommendations in our annual report this year.
We're officially adjourned. Thank you, guys.